All right, so buckle up, everybody, because today we are diving headfirst into ancient Greece.
Straight to the source.
Yeah, with, a philosopher who surprises me how relevant he still is today.
Right.
Aristotle.
Aristotle.
We are cracking open the Ethics of Aristotle.
Mm-hmm.
At least some really, really thought-provoking excerpts
Mm-hmm.
to try to figure out, like, what this guy actually thought about living a good life.
Yeah, and I think what's really cool about Aristotle, as opposed to maybe some other thinkers who we've dug into in our deep dives, is he's not just saying, like, be a good person.
Right.
He's really trying to give you, like, the tools and a system.
Yeah.
He thought very much about, like, how to actually implement this stuff.
Yeah.
And to him, it's very interesting. Happiness is like a skill, something that you actually build. It's not just something that you luck into.
Okay, now that you said that, now I'm really interested. So where does he even start with that? I mean, where do you even begin to build happiness like it's, a skill?
Well, he starts with this idea of eudaimonia, which, often gets translated as happiness, but it's way, way deeper than that.
Yeah.
Okay. Think about it less in terms of like winning the lottery and think about it more in terms of like, does your life on a day-to-day basis have meaning? And not meaning that's like imposed from the outside, but actually meaning on your own terms.
So it's not about like just feeling good all the time, but like waking up and feeling like, okay, cool, my life has like weight to it. It has purpose.
Exactly. It's about like fulfilling your potential as a human being.
Oh, wow.
And for Aristotle, that really meant cultivating virtue. But now when I say virtue, I don't want you to think like,
Not like a superhero.
Yeah, like a superpower that you're born with or something like that.
Right. So what's his take then? How do we become virtuous?
Practice. It's about forming habits.
Right.
He has this great analogy. He says, it's like a sculptor who's, chiseling away at the stone, except the stone that you're chiseling away at is your own character. Yeah. And every single day, every choice that you make is either, sort of forming a more virtuous you or a less virtuous you.
So it's less about like just this inherent goodness that you're born with and more about, like you said, consistently making these good choices, even when it's hard.
Precisely. And this is where it gets like even more interesting. He doesn't just say like, be good, right?
Right.
He actually saw virtue as this mean state, this balance point between extremes of behavior.
Okay.
So let's think about courage.
Okay.
Right?
Okay.
To him, courage wasn't just like, blindly rushing into danger. It was about finding that sweet spot between recklessness and cowardice.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I see that. So it's like, being cautious isn't always a bad thing, but neither is, being bold when the situation calls for it.
Right.
And I guess like finding that balance is key.
Finding that balance is key. And he applies that to all sorts of virtues, right?
Yeah.
So, generosity, for example. Generosity is not about like giving away everything that you have.
Right.
It's about finding that middle ground between stinginess and reckless spending.
So how do you, like, practically speaking, how do you do that? How do you know where the mean is in any given situation? Because they're so different.
Right. This is where practical wisdom, or what he called phronesis, comes in.
Yeah.
And, one way to think about it is, like, imagine you're a chef, like a really, really high-level chef.
Okay.
Knowing the ingredients is one thing. Knowing about salt and pepper and this herb and that herb,
right,
that's one thing. But sensing how they will all come together in that moment with those specific flavors in that dish to make something that's truly sublime, that's phronesis.
Right.
It's this wisdom that can only be honed through experience, through actually doing it and seeing what works and what doesn't work.
So, okay, so just reading about ethics isn't enough. You've got to actually live it and mess up and make mistakes and learn from those mistakes. And that's how you build this practical wisdom.
Exactly. And that's why Aristotle, was really big on experience, on learning from those who've walked the path before you, who've been there and done that.
Right. Because it's one thing to like read a book about, I don't know, being a good leader, but it's another thing to actually lead a team through like a crisis.
Exactly. That's where this real deep ethical understanding is forged in the fire of experience.
Okay, that makes total sense. You can't learn everything from a book, especially when it comes to something like this.
And speaking of things that, are kind of complex and nuanced, Aristotle doesn't shy away from the social aspects of living a virtuous life. In fact, he has some very strong opinions about friendship.
Oh, here we go. Okay.
And not just like casual friendship, but like
Real friendship.
true friendship, yeah.
Okay, so what's Aristotle's hot take on friends?
So he has these different types of friendships. So you've got like friendships of utility, right? Like your coworkers. You help each other out at work. You've got friendships of pleasure.
Yeah.
These are your buddies that you go have a good time with. And those are fine. Those are
I have plenty of those.
right. Exactly. But to him, that wasn't like the gold standard of friendship.
Yeah.
The gold standard of friendship was friendship based on mutual respect and admiration for each other's goodness.
Okay.
Not because they're fun to be around. Not because, they give you things or you do stuff for each other, but because you actually see something in their character that makes you want to be better.
Wow. So he's almost making it like being a good friend is like a moral duty in a way.
In a way, yes. Although duty kind of makes it sound cold and sterile.
Yeah.
He would also say that it's the most fulfilling type of relationship.
Right.
Because you're both encouraging each other. You're both striving for virtue together. It's like having a,
Oh, like a workout buddy.
yes.
But for your character.
Exactly.
Yes.
You're pushing each other to be better versions of yourselves.
That's actually kind of beautiful when you think about it that way.
It is. It's about like shared growth. You're both sort of constantly pushing toward that eudaimonia that we talked about.
Yeah.
That flourishing. And he actually believed that this kind of friendship could only really exist between genuinely virtuous people.
Which, I mean, makes sense if you think about it because, yeah, it's hard to have that really deep connection with someone where, like, your values are totally different.
Right. You need that shared ground of those shared values to actually have that kind of growth and mutual respect.
Yeah.
But, Aristotle doesn't just, he doesn't just stop at individual ethics.
Right.
He was also very much a political thinker.
So how does he, like, connect those two? Like, how does he connect personal ethics to the bigger picture of, like, society as a whole?
Well, to Aristotle, a just society, a society with laws that reflected this practical wisdom,
Okay.
was absolutely crucial for individuals to thrive.
So he's saying that good laws actually help people to become better.
He absolutely believed that. He saw law as an expression of practical wisdom, but applied at a higher level, right? Applied to the common good. So, a good law isn't arbitrary. It's not just about, controlling people. It's there to actually help guide people.
Right.
It's to give them a sense, like a framework, for ethical behavior.
Oh, okay. So if our individual actions like shape our individual characters, he's saying like laws kind of do the same thing for a society as a whole?
You got it.
Okay.
And this wasn't just some like theoretical idea for him. He really dove into like different types of government, analyzing how they impacted this whole justice thing.
So he's basically saying like how we organize ourselves politically has a direct impact on whether people can even be good.
He's saying that, yeah.
That's kind of wild to think about.
It is wild. But for him, it was all connected, right? So personal virtue, friendship, just society. These weren't just separate things. They were all pieces of the same puzzle.
Right.
And they were all aimed at ultimately that same goal.
Which is?
Eudaimonia.
Eudaimonia. All right. So we've got happiness as a skill, virtue as a habit, friendship as like a character building exercise, laws shaping entire societies.
Yeah.
What else did this guy get into?
Oh, there's so much more. We've barely scratched the surface. Like we could do a whole deep dive just on how Aristotle thought we should deal with our desires.
Oh, yeah.
Like what's the difference between, knowing what's right and then actually doing it?
Okay, hold on. Stop right there for a second because that is like the story of my life. It's like, I know I should eat healthier, but then I see a plate of cookies and like all bets are off.
Aristotle totally gets it. Oh, he totally gets that.
He does.
He acknowledged this like constant inner struggle, right?
Yeah.
Between like our rational side, the part of us that's like, I should know better. And then those like deep down, like impulsive desires.
Right.
The ancient Greeks, they had this whole thing about reason versus appetite.
Okay. Yeah.
It's like this battle going on inside of us.
So how do we win the battle? I mean, the cookies usually win, let's be honest.
Well, remember how we were talking about virtue being like a habit?
Yeah.
Like you're building that muscle.
Uh-huh.
Same goes for like the less than virtuous stuff too.
Oh, no.
Right. So Aristotle would say, like every time you give in to that cookie craving, you're basically strengthening the cookie monster part of your brain.
Ugh. So I'm actually like making it harder to resist next time.
It's not about making it harder.
Okay.
It's about understanding that every choice has these long-term consequences, right?
Right.
It's like, think of it like working out, right? The more you work a certain muscle,
The stronger it gets.
exactly.
Okay. Okay.
So, yeah, if you keep indulging the same desires, those desires are going to get stronger. But the flip side is true too, right?
Okay, good.
Every time you do resist, every time you make that virtuous choice, you're strengthening that self-control muscle. You're making it a little bit easier next time.
Okay, that actually is motivating. It's like you're building those like mental pathways, you know?
Exactly.
Where it's like what you actually want for yourself.
And it connects to something else he talks about that's so cool. It's this idea of megalopsychia.
Megalopsychia. Hold on, what is that? Like, break that down for me.
It's often translated as greatness of soul.
Greatness of soul. Whoa.
Yeah, so it's not about like arrogance or anything like that. It's more like this like noble pride
Okay.
that comes from knowing your own worth and from striving for truly great things.
So what? Like being famous, rich? I don't know.
No, not like that.
Okay.
It's about fulfilling your potential as a person based on like, building those virtues we were talking about.
So it's like, I can be proud of myself for working hard, to be honest, to be kind, even if like no one's giving me like a medal for it.
Exactly.
Okay.
It's an inner sense of accomplishment.
Got it.
That's driven by like actually living in line with those values.
Okay.
And it ties back to happiness, right?
Yeah.
To eudaimonia. Aristotle believed that like truly living up to your potential, like striving for that greatness of soul, that was the most fulfilling way to live.
Okay, I'm starting to see how all these pieces like fit together, you know? But there is one thing that, I don't know, it's been bugging me a little bit.
Yeah.
Isn't all this focus on like personal virtue, on my happiness, isn't that kind of, I don't know, a little selfish?
Yeah.
What about everyone else?
That's a great question. And it's something that people have, kind of struggled with when it comes to Aristotle for centuries.
Really?
But I mean, remember, he didn't see us as like these isolated individuals, right?
Okay.
To him, humans are social creatures by nature.
Yeah, he was all about friendship, about being part of a community.
Right. He actually believed that we can only reach our full potential within a just society.
Interesting.
Right.
So this is where his ideas about like personal ethics and political philosophy, they kind of like come together.
Exactly. They're all intertwined.
So, I mean, how does he bridge that gap then between like being good as an individual and having a good society?
Well, remember those laws reflecting practical wisdom?
Yeah.
He believed that those laws weren't just about like keeping order, right? Or preventing chaos. They were actually about helping people to become more virtuous.
Really?
Yeah. So it's kind of like this feedback loop, right?
Okay.
Good people make a good society, but a good society also helps to make more people good.
Right. Yeah, that makes sense.
It's like, think about it. If everyone around you values honesty,
Yeah.
you're way more likely to be honest yourself, right?
Totally.
Whereas if you're surrounded by people who are dishonest all the time, it's going to be a lot harder to stick to those values.
That's a really good point. Yeah. But I mean, laws can only go so far, right?
Of course.
Ultimately, we still have to choose to do the right thing, even when it's hard, even when no one's watching.
Exactly. 100%. And that's where civic virtue comes in.
Civic virtue.
It's not just about like obeying the law out of fear of getting punished.
Right.
It's about genuinely caring about the common good.
Okay.
Understanding that your actions have an impact on everyone else.
So it's not enough to just be like, good in my own little bubble. I've got to like actively participate in making society better as a whole.
That was Aristotle's view. Absolutely.
Wow.
And it wasn't just about following rules, right?
Wow.
It was about cultivating a sense of like genuine goodwill toward your fellow citizens.
Okay.
Even those who you might not know personally.
It's like expanding that true friendship idea, but outward.
Yes.
To like the whole community,
Yeah.
seeing it as like something to care for, to nurture.
And that's something that I think, we could definitely use a little more these days.
No argument there.
Yeah.
But okay, so we've been talking about virtue as this like balancing act.
Right.
How did he actually like break that down? Did he like, what did he consider to be like the most important virtues? Like, how did he categorize them?
So, he had a whole system.
Of course he did.
It's pretty intricate. We could send a whole other deep dive talking about it.
Right.
But one of the most important distinctions he makes is between what he calls intellectual virtues and moral virtues.
Okay, so intellectual virtues, what? Like book smarts, basically.
Kind of, but it's more than that.
Okay.
It's about like the mind, right?
Uh-huh.
So yeah, things like wisdom, knowledge, understanding.
Okay, so being like smart, well-informed.
Being able to think critically.
Okay.
Being able to discern like truth from falsehood.
Right. Got it.
But then he says you've also got these moral virtues, and those are more about like character.
Okay.
And there's the things like, courage, generosity, honesty, and get this, wit.
Wait, hold on. Humor has its own virtue.
Yeah. He actually has a whole thing about humor.
Okay, what makes someone like virtuously funny, according to Aristotle?
It's about finding that mean again.
Oh, there it is. Okay.
Right. So like to him, a virtuous sense of humor, it's about being like witty and clever, but without being cruel or insensitive.
So you can make a joke that makes everyone laugh, but if it's at someone else's expense, if it's like demeaning or hurtful, that's not good humor.
Exactly. It's about using your humor to uplift people, to bring joy, not to tear others down.
I like that. So it's not just about being funny, it's about being funny in a way that's also like kind and considerate.
Exactly. And I think this idea that even humor, right, like something is as simple as a joke, has this like ethical dimension. It just shows how deeply Aristotle thought about how virtue actually plays out in our everyday lives.
It's like he's saying every action we take, even something as small as like telling a joke, can be this opportunity to practice virtue, to actually choose good.
Yes. And I think that's why he spent so much time like really dissecting all these different virtues and their corresponding vices, right?
Yeah.
He wanted to give us like a guidebook, essentially, navigating the moral landscape of life.
So he wasn't just interested in like the big picture of ethics. He was also interested in the nitty-gritty details of how we actually live it out.
Yes. And he didn't shy away from the complexities, right?
Right.
From the gray areas.
Yeah.
From the fact that there often is no easy answer when it comes to ethical dilemmas.
Which is where the, what was it called? Practical wisdom.
Phronesis.
Right, comes in.
Right.
It's like you need that to navigate those gray areas.
Totally. Because for Aristotle, ethics wasn't about like memorizing a set of rules.
Right.
It was about developing the judgment, the discernment, the sensitivity to be able to look at each unique situation and be like, okay, what's the best possible choice I can make here?
And that takes practice, that takes experience, that takes, honestly, probably like making mistakes and learning from them.
100%. It's a lifelong journey, this whole pursuit of virtue.
It is.
It's not like you just arrive one day and you're like, boom, I'm virtuous.
Right.
It's this constant process of learning and growth.
And it's something that's probably best done, like he was saying, in the company of others.
Yes.
With friends, with family, with people who share your values.
Build a community that supports you in that journey.
Which brings us back to like his emphasis on friendship, on civic virtue, on recognizing that like my happiness is not separate from everyone else's.
It's all interconnected.
Yeah.
And I think it's this interconnectedness, this understanding that we're all in this together.
Yeah.
That I think makes Aristotle's ethics so relevant, so resonant, even today,
Yeah. I don't know about you, but I'm kind of amazed that like here we are all these centuries later and we're still trying to figure out the same stuff. Like what does it actually mean to live a good life?
It's pretty wild when you think about it, right? But I think that's what makes Aristotle so fascinating. His ideas, they still resonate.
Totally. And he actually gave us a way to think about it, right? This whole idea of cultivating virtue, of striving for like excellence, not just in like one area of your life, but like in everything you do.
Yeah. And it's not about like perfection, right? It's about this constant like striving, this pushing yourself to grow a little bit every day.
Becoming a little wiser, a little bit kinder.
Exactly. And doing it in a way that recognizes we're not just like isolated individuals. Aristotle was all about how interconnected we all are.
Right. Like it's not enough to just be like, I'm going to be a good person and like lock myself in my room. We've got to actually care about the world around us.
100%. That's where this idea of civic virtue comes into play. It's recognizing that our actions, they don't just impact us, they have these ripple effects.
So like by being better people, we're also creating a better world for like everyone.
Exactly.
That actually reminds me of that quote. I think it's Gandhi who said it. Be the change you want to see in the world.
Oh, yeah, I love that quote. and yeah, it's very much in line with Aristotle's thinking. He just might have phrased it a little differently back then.
Right, with like a toga and sandals and
Exactly.
But it's such a powerful message, especially today when, things feel so messed up sometimes, Aristotle's like, hey, remember, we're all in this together.
We are. And by working together, by supporting each other, by striving for that common good, we can create a better world.
It's a pretty beautiful idea. And the cool thing is, it's not like some, impossible dream. It's about those small, everyday choices.
Totally. Like, how can I be a little more ethical today? How can I be a better friend, a better neighbor?
Even just like a better listener.
Yes. And I think that's something Aristotle would be really happy about. He was all about questioning, about never just blindly accepting things.
Right. He'd want us to be like, okay, those are interesting ideas, Aristotle, but let me see how they actually work in my life.
Exactly.
Yeah.
He wouldn't want us to treat his work like some sacred text or something. It's a starting point.
Yeah, like a springboard for our own deep dive, if you will. And speaking of deep dives, I think we've gone pretty deep on Aristotle's ethics today.
We have, though there's always more to explore, right? He was a prolific guy.
Oh, yeah, definitely. But hopefully this has given everyone listening a little something to chew on.
Some new ways of thinking about these big questions that, we've been wrestling with for millennia.
And maybe even spark some interesting conversations, right? Like, talk about this stuff with your friends, your family.
Your coworkers. See how it resonates with your own experiences.
Yeah.
Because that's what philosophy is all about, isn't it? It's not just about, hoarding knowledge.
It's about actually putting it into practice.
Yes. Living more thoughtfully, making more ethical choices.
And hopefully creating a better world along the way.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
Well, on that note, I want to say thank you to everyone for joining us on this deep dive into the world of Aristotle. And until next time, happy philosophizing.